there, Lynn of LL Woodworks. I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk in this series about blank segmentation for pen making. And segmentation is just the use of multiple species, multiple pieces, multiple materials to make a pen blank. In this first video of our series, we're going to look at the design and at the cutting of the pieces and at the gluing up of the segments. And in our second video, we're going to look at using 3/32 aluminum rods as accents in a pen blank. You know, some people can just throw together pieces and make a pen blank. I can't. I have to think things out. I have to plan things out, and I would urge you to do that too. Give your pen blank some thought. What kind of woods are you going to use? Are they going to be contrasting with each other? Are they going to complement each other? But you want to think about your species of wood. For instance, to use mesquite and maple would be gorgeous. Or to use Ambonia burl with any one of those two would be a pretty pen blank. The use of bloodwood used with walnut. Either one of those with maple. All of these would make just beautiful pen blanks, but that's the kind of thought process that you need to put into your design phase. Not only that, but design your shapes. Are you capable of cutting what it is you want to do with the right angles? Can you get your joints straight? What materials are you going to use for segments? You can use aluminum, you can use brass rods, you can use any old used credit cards. You can use thin strips of veneer. There's a countless number of ways to make a segmented blank. And give these things some thoughts as you start to design your segmented pen blank. In just a minute, we're going to begin our design process of this pen. As you can see, we had a couple of different colors of wood. We'll talk about that in this next phase of the video. But before we look at the design, the specifications of the pen blank that we're going to make and how we're going to go about making, take a look at some of these segmented blanks that I've made over the years. And you can see how contrasting colors and complementing colors can really just make a gorgeous pen. And now, let's start the design phase. Okay, here we are at the workbench, and I've laid out what I want to do with this for this segmented blank. We're going to make this out of a Junior Gent No. 2 roller ball. And as you can see here, I've outlined kind of what I want to do on the upper blank and on the lower blank. In both the upper and the lower blank, the center section is going to be out of this natural looking box elder burl. And flanking it on each end is going to be 3/8 of an inch of this gorgeous blue box elder burl. And separating each of these segments will be a 1/64 of an inch sliver of aluminum. Now, I buy this at one of the local hobby stores in town. I see where some guys have used Coke cans or beer cans, but the aluminum out of a soft drink or a beer can to do this. And I've done that as well. The only problem is it's only 1/3 of the thickness. Sometimes it's small. When you need that thin accent, those are great. But I wanted something a little bolder here. Those soda cans are only 4 to 5 thousandths thick at most, and actually they change. The middle of the can is thinner than the top and the bottom. So I wanted something consistent and something a little more substantial, so I'm going with 1/64 of an inch thick aluminum that we will put in between each segment on both the upper and the lower blank. Now that's what we're going to do in this first video, but once that's finished, we're going to come back and we're going to use a 3/32 of an inch aluminum rod, which is 93 thousandths. And we're going to put an aluminum dot serves as an accent piece in 4 places around the block. Now we're going to do this on the cap only. We're not going to do it on the lower section, but on the cap only. And lastly, we're going to turn a custom finial out of the blue double-dyed box elder burl that will match these segments that we've got in the pen. As you saw in the preview shot of the pen, it's really going to be pretty. I might also add that these blanks were made, they were stabilized and dyed by Joel Jennings of Texas Woodhouse. I'll leave a description and contact down below in the comment section. So that's what we're going to do with this blank. Then the next step will be go to the bandsaw and cut the actual pieces. There's going to be our center section for our upper barrel, center section for our lower barrel, and then we're flanked at each side by a piece of blue box elder burl each side. Trying to match the grain as best I can. The next step is to cut the 4 pieces for the 1/64 inch thick aluminum that'll serve as our segments, separators, and highlights. I've prepared the 4 pieces of aluminum, and it's just 4 pieces of aluminum. Mine is 1/16 of an inch thick, and they're roughly 3/4 by 3/4 square. And you have to make sure that you sand them, rough them up with some sandpaper, and get the burrs off the edges. You can either tap it down with a hammer or sand it off or grind it or whatever works for you. Make sure they're deburred and they're sanded, and then wipe them down to get any oil and aluminum dust off of it. And now we are ready to glue them into the blank. Okay, here's our blank as it's going to be ready to glue up. And I started not to show the glue up, but since it is segmented, I'm going to show you what I do to help keep things lined up a little bit. I've made a little L from just 3/4 inch MDF. You can use plywood, whatever. I've got it coated with some plastic to keep it from sticking. And then I've also made a little block that will go here. And what will happen is once we get it glue applied, that'll go there like this, and then the other clamp will go here to pull it together, and this clamp will help keep things lined up. So I always use 2-part epoxy. I use Loctite, heavy duty. This set time is about 5 minutes. That's how much work time you have. Then I leave it at least 6 hours, and most of the time I leave it overnight before I'll start machining it. With that, let's glue this blank up. Let's just start with an equal bead of the resin and an equal bead of the hardener. And I use these popsicle sticks. They're so cheap, you can buy tons of them for next to nothing. Have to make sure this is thoroughly mixed. You got plenty of time. Once it's mixed, it starts working in about 5-7 minutes. It'll start getting thick enough that you need to worry about go ahead and getting your clamping done by then. But that's plenty of time for us. Once you get your parts lined up like you want them, oriented like you want, put it on the wood pieces first. I heard guys talking about getting epoxy on their hands and to wear gloves, and that's probably a good idea because they can't get it off. Well, denatured alcohol will cut epoxy, and just take everything off. As a matter of fact, that's what we use here. Need to coat each surface. Make sure we've got epoxy on each surface. Our denatured alcohol I talked about. Just takes it right off your fingertips, not to worry. And then we put in that'll keep things lined up this way or closer. We'll still trim it up when it dries. And then here we start squeezing the joints together. It's a good idea to take a screwdriver or something and make sure everything is bottomed out. Sometimes they'll try to lift when you clamp it up. One side will try to lift up, and sometimes the aluminum segments will try to lift out as well. So we just need to make sure everything is true on the bottom. This keeps it true on the sides. And that's our glue up. We'll just let this set aside and dry. I'm going to do the same thing with the lower blank. I'll do that off camera. And then we'll be ready to square it up and drill our holes for our aluminum dots on the upper barrel. We've got our upper blank, we've got our lower blank. We'll let it sit, well, a couple hours, and then take the clamps off. And next thing we'll do is to square the blanks up, round off the edges, and get them ready for drilling. Okay, the blank has dried, and I've taken it and I've trimmed it up, I've cleaned it up, got it square. And I've also marked in 3/16 right there and right there. That is where we will drill on each side that 93.5 thousandths hole. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Now next week, in video number 2 of this Penmakers Canvas series, we're going to look at using a 3/32 aluminum rod as an accent pieces in the upper cap. But before we leave, I'm going to ask you to do what I'm calling LLS. Like this video, leave us a comment, and subscribe. That way, you'll know when we've posted the next video. Well, we'll see you next week, and until then, work safe.